Hello, hello.
Hey, what's new?
Ah, nothing and lots all at the same time.
Same.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get back on a regular sleep cycle after like working way too much or being overcommitted. Now I'm trying to like get back into a regular, like what's the right amount of sleep?
I love that, and I feel like that gets trickier as we age.
Oh yeah,
Doesn't it? Yes,
so
sleep is
true.
always a thing for me as well.
Uh, I love that. Like when we were doing our check-in before we started recording, we were talking about the general theme in both of our lives is leaning into the heart.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you were able to kind of find that thread because that's it. That's it. So yeah, how should we begin? Do you wanna?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like even though parts of this year, particularly like the first quarter of this year, was like incredibly hard and painful, I think what got me through it, um, maybe faster than a younger version of me would have, is that I was willing to lean into the hard, like
Mhm.
say the truth, even though other people would experience it painfully because I wasn't being mean, I was being honest,
Right.
right? Like when I was talking to Chris about like something's not working in our marriage, um, like I was just being radically honest. And then like without the attachment to the outcome, except that I wanted to feel like more satisfaction and I wanted to
Mhm.
feel more peaceful. And like, then when you have kids and in-laws and like parents and other people orbiting around you, and they don't want you to be honest in that way if it causes them discomfort.
That's right.
And it's like, but I need to do this anyway because I have to trust that it's got to be better than what we're in right now.
Mhm.
And I feel like that has popped up periodically this year. Like just last week, I was like, I need to communicate to this person that I've experienced harm with what they've said about me. And I'm not going to tell them that I experience as anti-blackness. Instead, I'm going to package it in a different way that I think that they can digest it. But it's not for them to change. It's for me to get peace, to say that I let you know, and now it's in your court. You could decide whether or not you're going to have do the work to repair this relationship. And I'll have to say goodbye for now because I want this relationship to be better. I believe it can be better
Mhm.
than it is now.
Totally. Oh my gosh, it's not for them to change, it's for me to have peace.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing, and I think that right there is perhaps one of the things that keeps us from leaning into the hard, or at least that has kept me from leaning into the hard, is I want to control the outcome, which means my communication has to be like a chess game as opposed to just honest. And because if I'm just honest, then I perhaps lose control. And I think for so many people, I don't think I'm alone in that. I think for so many people, it's really hard to let go of control or the illusion of control. We never
Mm-hmm.
have control, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's really hard to let go of the illusion of control, um, because we're so attached to certain outcomes. So there's a couple of things we have to let go of there. We
Mm-hmm.
have to let go of the illusion of control, and we have to release our grip on certain desired outcomes and be willing to just kind of surrender to what is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so hard.
It's so hard. Yeah,
And
it's
it's
so
such a
hard.
practice, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
just like wake up one day and be like, I'm just going to surrender to what is. Like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, no. And for years I resisted. Like I was so attached to the outcome. And so then I was trying to like manipulate feels too strong of a word, like influence
Yes.
people or like feel like I could direct them in
Mm-hmm.
my personal life. And yet that was just causing me stress and not
Mm-hmm.
actually empowering the other people in the relationship to do what they needed to do.
Absolutely. So I'm curious because I've noticed that lately I'm struggling with this idea of, with all of those things, with relinquishing the illusion of control, releasing my grip and an attachment to desired outcomes, and just speaking my truth. Why do you think it took you to when it did to be more radically honest? Like, what was getting in the way?
That's a good question. I would say that there's always been some part of me who likes to tell the truth, but I don't think I was always comfortable inside of myself with dealing with um, the emotional fallout or the emotional entanglement that happens sometimes when people don't like what you're saying. So I think I used to put on a good show. Like, even I would say the things, even though internally I would be a mess.
Mm.
But I feel like I'm more at peace inside of myself. So I think like that's the liberation. Like that's what I've been thinking about lately. Like this is what liberation feels like when you
Mhm.
feel free inside of yourself, that while you know, I don't want people to be mad at me. And yet, if they need to be mad at me, that's okay. And I think I used to try to like suck it up before, when now I think my body has softened into that. But also, I think like I'm less caught up in what society tells me I should be.
Mhm.
And I surround myself more with people who just let me be like who I authentically am. And now the people who don't let me do that, and they don't even know that, some people don't even know that they're trying to police me or trying to like cage me. Like, I don't want those people in my inner circle, because like but I used to have those were most of the people in my
Right.
life when I was younger. But I also think like they're policing themselves
Huh?
and they're
Yeah.
in cages too. But now I can see the cage, and I can decide like, am I gonna just be in this cage? And it's funny talking to my 16-year-old, you know, where like just last week we were checking in on like how the year's been, because it started off rocky. And like he is like in many ways like a binary thinker. And so he believes that once you have kids, and once you're married and you have kids, you should forget who you are as a person and do everything that is for the kids' welfare. So if it's an unhappy marriage, you should stay married until the kids are out of the house, because that's what you signed up for. Like, he's very clear about that. We'll say it almost
Oh, to be
exactly those
young.
words, right? And my daughter, who's like a couple years younger, she's like, well, I don't know about that. Like, if the whole idea of like happy parents, happy kids, right? Like, if the parents are fighting or it's abusive or like, then like we wouldn't want that to happen. So it's been interesting having those conversations. But I feel like a lot of people live into that. Like, I made this choice, like committed to this job or to this person, and like I'm trapped. And there isn't degrees of freedom within that. And I feel like I've blown that up, that now I'm like, no, that's a story I'm telling myself.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's something that I've been really noticing, is all of the, I think, just expectations that things are one or the other, right? Like your son is talking about. And so if I acknowledge these identities, if I acknowledge my queerness, if I acknowledge, I don't know, that I need more freedom in some way, then what immediately pops up is fear. But I think the missing link there is what immediately pops up is like this binary option that I've been fed by society, where it's like, if my queerness comes up, it's like, then you're a lesbian and you're never going to be happy in your marriage. And then there's fear, but I didn't even know that part in the middle happened. It's like, it's all unconscious. And it's not
Right.
until I'm really sitting with it, being like, wait a second, why am I going from one extreme to another? Why can't I just have a conversation with Nick about whatever is coming up for me? And I think it's all of these expectations and binaries and false dichotomies that we just swim in all of our lives. And then we're not, even someone like me who's like trying so hard and meditating and been in therapy for 2 decades and all these things. I'm still unearthing like, oh my God, I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's wild.
It really is. We were Chris and I went, like, basically did like a double date with this couple we haven't seen in a long time. And you know, each pair of us had challenges in our marriage in the last like year and a half or something. And like we're on the other side of it for now, right? And you know, we talked about how each of us opted for like a non-traditional way to solve the problem, right? And so for them, you know, they decided to open their marriage, right? And that allowed them to say yes to each other again. And so what we're talking about is like there's so many couples who have been together for a while who reach this moment where it becomes binary, right? We either end it or we stay together and we're miserable. And then the third option is maybe we recalibrate what we think of this partnership or how we do this or what our roles are. And then that leads us both to be happier in this new chapter, this new season. And I feel like society doesn't tell people enough that there's this third option. And you and I have talked about this a little bit, like that there's this other way that feels gaining more traction, but still I feel like in so much of the US is like, let's talk about this in secret.
Right. And because of that training, I think that's one of the barriers that gets in the way of just being honest, that it's like, it's just conform. And then because it's like, that's the message. So then it doesn't even occur to me that I could just be radically honest about what's happening. And that Nick's a grown man who's responsible for his feelings and his thoughts, and like he can take time and like think about whatever, that like I don't have to take care of him or try to control the outcome. I can just be really honest about what's happening for me.
Right.
And then he just has a chance to be really honest with me about what he's thinking and feeling. And it can be that simple, but I complicate it for myself for all these different reasons. And I think it'd be so much easier to just lean into the heart and just be honest. But there's so many things that get in the way of that. Right? It's exhausting.
It really is. It really is. And I feel like it gets easier over time because I have positive experiences, right? Like I do this hard thing and then I feel all the of it. And then I get to the other side and it's lovely and transformative and peaceful. And there's increased resilience and complexity. And the more I have those experiences, the more I can trust that even if I can't see the path, I know that the staircase will appear. Like the path will appear, right? And can I just trust? Like, can I sit in this ambiguous place and trust it will all work out, however it's supposed to work out?
I love that metaphor. Mine of the, I can take the step and the staircase will appear, right? Mine is like, I'm going to walk off of this cliff.
That's like too much. Like even that visual, I'm like, oh,
God. You're so much better than mine.
No, but I'm just afraid of heights. So that's why it's like, oh, get out.
That is so much more hopeful.
So what's going to appear like when you go off the cliff? I didn't get like
either the future version of myself is going to be there to catch me, or I will grow wings when maybe I'll enjoy the free fall a little bit, but at some point they will grow wings, that like, or I will, there will be a parachute, that I didn't realize was there, like something, but that's how some of this stuff feels, is like, it feels like walking off a cliff. It feels like the risks feel so huge sometimes,
Yeah.
And when I think about, again, I think one of the things that everybody has, or most people, is like, what are the messages? And they might, from society, right? And they're different messages depending on the different identities that we hold. But like, there's all this pressure to conform. And then we all have our own stuff from intergenerational trauma or whatever. So mine is like, this is just my lot in life. And, there's a lot of like martyrdom and victimhood stuff. So it's like to fight all of these things and say the thing or do the thing and let go of attachment to control or, desired outcome. It feels like hurling myself off a cliff. So I think I need to start to use the stair metaphor.
And I'm gonna have to lean into this cliff thing, because like every time I'm like picturing, I'm like, but like there's definitely times when it feels like that, for sure.
Right. But it's like, it's not. Every time I've thrown myself off a cliff, it has been less painful and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined, right? So to your point about the learning, and making sure that we're taking stock and we're being reflective, and that we're not just focusing on like all the potential bad things that could happen and the fallout, some of which is probably inevitable. But the reflection of, no, I've been here before, and it's not only has it been okay, it's catapulted me to places that I never could have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think looking at my two kids and the ways in which the challenges of the beginning of the year and them like being supported through that difficulty, right, is like, I was also teaching them, we were teaching them how to take the step, not knowing what this will evolve into. And like they need to experience that the staircase is there, right? Or that they're going to grow wings, right? Like they need to figure that out. And like checking in with them, like in the last couple of weeks, like they're thriving, right? And I think part of that is because they lived through that. And like they were part of some of the conversations, and they saw like we're like better and stronger as a result, like our unit of 4. And like that as painful as that time was, like now we're on this other side, and like it's in their bones now, like it's in their like it's experientially part of their story now.
Right. Oh, and I love that so much. So, when we think about this through leaning into the hard through a parenting lens, that I think as we get further along, parenting has become so much about like protecting our kids from the hard stuff, or like clearing their path to make it easier. And that's coming from a place of love and good intentions, and wanting our children's life to be better, easier, less painful than ours. And we rob them of the opportunity to know they can grow rings, that they can be resilient, that they can do hard things. And so that when people experience problems, it's not our job to fix them. Problems are an opportunity to connect, to be together in the hard. Like we don't rush in and turn on the light. We just sit in the dark with our people. And we do it together. And what a gift we give our children when we're able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that Chris and I have been talking about lately is our relationship to grief. And I feel like, as someone who was a great compartmentalizer for a good chunk of my life, and is now, I feel so much more. Like in the last several years, I feel so much more. So like this message I sent to like a family member last week around like, I can't do this. Like I could connect to the grief of it, right? Like, and that sometimes there are goodbyes that need to happen, not in death, not in the literal death, but in the like, this is the end of our story in this way, and it will become this new thing. And Chris was like connecting to how much he doesn't connect to grief, right? Like all the stuff that's kind of happened, like unless it's like a 10 out of 10, he can't really connect to those feelings. So I don't know how much of that is male socialization, family of origin stuff, or just like that's how he like moves around in the world. That's how he like his survival strategy is to not connect to those feelings.
I think you're probably right. I think it's probably all of those things to some degree. And I see it more pronounced in my husband as well. So there does seem to perhaps be a gendered piece there.
Yes.
But I think there's also a human piece there, right? Where like I think we as humans try to distance ourselves from grief, from actual death, or just things that feel like death, like the hurtling yourself off a cliff feeling that feels like death to me sometimes. Endings, and that makes sense, right? We're human beings. We've only gotten to this place in evolution because we avoided painful things. We were scared of fire at some point, right? For good reason. And so I think about all of the intentional effort that you and me and so many others have really needed to give in order to sit with pain, not run away from the hard things, to like to experience the flames of discomfort. I'm thinking about Glennon Doyle as she talks about like experiencing the flames and the discomfort of transformation and walking straight in because you know you are fireproof. That doesn't happen on accident. That's an intentional muscle that needs to be developed. And even though I can recite that and I have it listed in my affirmations and I've experienced that so many times, if that is not an active daily practice, at least for me, I fall asleep and I forget and I get scared again, and I resist and avoid. So it's just needs to be built into our lives. At least.
Yeah. For a long time, I thought of this quote from Jeff Foster, which was to remember that you are the ocean, not the wave.
Yes.
And so like sometimes I bring that into my mind's eye of like, yeah, there are these waves of emotions, these waves of conflict, but that's momentary and it gets absorbed in the vastness of who we are. And to remember that we're all interconnected. And yet our mind will tell a story that we are so separate.
Especially when we're scared or angry, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When we get that nervous system kicking, it really wants it to be us versus them. And I've got to protect myself. And
yeah.
It's so easy to avoid the thing that would actually bring some peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I have appreciated about myself that I feel like has grown particularly in this year is as I've worked through my like grief and rage, particularly around racial stress and trauma stuff, not that it ever ends, is I feel so much more the capacity to have grace and compassion for the other. Even while I'm holding them accountable, it's coming from a place of love. Like if this, family member on Chris's side could hear that what I did was give him a gift of saying like, this is where I'm at. This is where I think we're not in the same place. And this is what I need in order for us to move past this. Like that is like me, like putting an olive branch. How he interprets it, I don't know. But like for me, it's like it didn't come like to me, I felt the anger that's about, I'm so angry with you, I can't see your full humanity anymore. And I just need to have like power over. And I feel like I don't connect to that kind of anger as much anymore. because of all the healing that's happening inside.
That sounds incredible.
So, I mean, if I can do more of that, you
Yeah,
know, that's what I want to do.
for sure. And I know that the answer to this is complex and multifaceted, but can you give us a glimpse as to how you think some of that healing happened in terms of connecting less to the anger that leads to like power over and punishment and whatever, and connect more to accountability, but also compassion and grace?
Yeah. I feel like it's been happening over the last probably like 15 years. Like I feel like part of it was learning about dialectics and multiple truths,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel for me letting go of that there's this absolute truth and like so building the muscle, because for a long time, especially in like my 20s and 30s, like there was a right way.
Mhm.
And I feel like letting go of that
Mhm.
helped create space. But then I think like the hundreds of hours of anti-racism facilitation of workshops and like feeling the grief and the rage of 2020, 2021, but also I think like the ongoing meditative yogic practices and like just keep coming back to we're all connected and this idea of like how much socialization all of us have had,
Right.
right? So when I feel like the beauty of anti-racism, which is what I think people don't get when they're not deeply steeped in it, is that it's about how does everybody get free. It's not about like white people should feel bad and guilty or that, it's more about this is systemic,
Right.
this is structural, and we've all been conditioned in it if we spent some time in colonized places. And so that helps me have compassion of like, of course, you've
Right.
never had to have this like deep reckoning because you live in such a white space. Like
Right.
everyone you surround with yourself is white. So, and if they're all living the average white life, how could you
Right.
possibly have built this literacy or these muscles?
Sure.
That doesn't mean I want to spend a lot of time with you
Right.
at this point in my life. And yet I can see, right, that it's not personal, right? It's about something much larger.
Right. Ooh, and then so I'm also wondering because to know that something is not personal, right? And not just know it intellectually, but like embody that reality.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there also has to be a lot of self-love, self-worth, self-trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for me, what I've noticed is that when I'm taking something personal that I shouldn't, for lots of the things that you mentioned, other reasons, whatever, I think it's also because I am not necessarily grounded in my own self-worth, self-love. But if I can show up and feel confident that, like, of course I'm lovable, of course I have worth, of course I have value, and then I take all of these other things, then it's, I don't know, it's a lot easier for me to sit with that. Do you think that plays
Mm-hmm.
a role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because I've spent a lot of time becoming friends with my emotions, so I think of like, here's the duality. I think everything has to do with race, and I think not everything has to do with race. Like that's the duality of it. And so, example, like over the weekend, I met up with some friends for lunch. I was the first one to get to this Thai restaurant, and the person working there, I'm not sure, maybe she was Thai, maybe just Asian American. And I remember when I got there, she said something like, "Do you we don't have the lunch menu today. Is that okay?" I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then she asked me again. She's like, "Well, no, we don't have." And I was the part of me that thinks it's always about race is like, is this a little anti-blackness? Like, is she like operating on some stereotype? Um, and I said, "No, yeah, I'm totally fine with," because she was like, "Do you want to see the menu?" I was like, "No, I'm good. Like, just table for four." And I was like, this is, and then maybe there was something in like my body language or something. And then she proceeded to explain why she was asking this. And it's because she had had this other experience earlier in the day where someone had been very upset And
Oh.
even though she had said it was not, it was a Saturday, so there wasn't a lunch menu, when they sat down and saw the menu, they were like, oh, this is too expensive. And when she tried to explain, like, oh, yeah, that's why I mentioned, like, we don't have the lunch menu. And then she was perceived as rude and like
Mm,
impolite. And so she was operating from her own trauma, right?
sure.
And so I'm glad I had that moment of curiosity. Like, I was irritated,
Right.
but there was that moment of also curiosity of like, well, I don't know what this is about.
Right.
Exactly. And I love that then we had this conversation, like it
Mhm.
was able to move. But I feel like if I had just shut down and was
Yep.
like, oh, this feels racist, and like operating from like Asian, Black, like
Mhm.
dynamics that can happen, like then I would have like not had the opportunity for us to have this conversation of what it must be like for her as an Asian American woman, operating in this restaurant and all the people she has to deal with,
Right.
right? And so just thinking about how many of us are moving around the world with trauma,
Right.
right? Or like these negative experiences that then we recalibrate, right? To try to do it better the next time so we don't have those negative interactions.
Right.
But then that might cause a different negative interaction because I was experiencing it. It's like, why are you just give me a table? Like,
Right.
um, yeah,
Right. And that so many of the things that we experience as upsetting in the world are actually just other people's efforts to protect themselves.
yeah.
Right. And come from a place of self-preservation
Mm-hmm.
and protectiveness, and have nothing to do with us. And it doesn't change the fact that it still affects us, even though it has
Right,
nothing to do with us. And
right.
these are tricky things to sit with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But I love that it came back to curiosity for you. And again, like how hard you needed to work and how much time it has taken you to be able to sit with like, yeah, I can be irritated and that's valid for me to feel that way. And I can still be curious, which is what allowed things to move and
Mm-hmm.
transform. And for, I
Yeah.
assume, you both to feel better about the
Mm-hmm.
interaction.
Yeah, it was really lovely. Yeah, so it got there.
Yeah. That's so great. That's so great. So curiosity is one of the things that it sounds like allows us to kind of operate in a different way. One of the things that I was telling you before we started recording is that I've been intentionally working on my relationship with grief and death and endings. Over the last few weeks, couple of months, there's been just a lot of things that have been provoking this. I started to work with a client who was walking toward the end of her life. I'm deep in my spiritual practices where I'm trying to work with my ancestors, and so thinking about not just their deaths but their lives, etc. But for me, one of the things that's helping me operate differently and lean into the hard is staying connected to my grief, as you were talking about, staying connected to endings, to the fact that things are finite, that we all die. And I think it's so easy, like we were saying, to avoid these feelings because it feels
Mhm.
morbid or painful or whatever. But I'm realizing that the more that I can stay in right relationship with death, grief, endings,
Mhm.
etc., the better I'm able to live, um, really fully live. And, I think I used to be a big country fan when I was younger, and Tim McGraw has this song called Live Like You Were Dying.
Mhm.
And I cry every time I listen to that song because there's so many moments in my life where I did feel like I was doing that. But if I could do that more often than not, right,
Mhm.
how would my life be different? And so
Mhm.
that's the thing that I'm playing with right now that helps
Sure.
me lean into the hard, is stay connected to like, my husband and I could divorce someday. Someday he's going to die. Someday my children are going to die. Like, I'm going to die. The people I love are going to die. Like, this
Mhm.
ends.
Yeah.
So what is really important? Uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that ancestor work is so important. And thinking about when my mom died in fall of 2017, like we're approaching the the anniversary, like that was a pivotal time for me, because I thought, what are the things she didn't say yes to because she thought she
Mhm.
had so much more time, right? Like she didn't know she was dying until those last 3 weeks, right? And so wanting to think about, don't put off
Mhm.
what you can do today.
That's
Like
right.
don't stay suffering.
That's right.
Don't like not take risks because you're afraid, because we don't know how long we have, right?
Mhm.
And so like why not take the opportunities, or have the honest conversations, or take up a hobby, or say you love someone, like whatever it is, because this life is precious and so many of us are so busy that we don't treat it like that.
That's right. And for whatever reason, the human in me or something specific to me, that's one of the few things that really allows me to explore those questions from a really honest place, as opposed to path of least resistance, right? Or like, what's
Mhm.
the quickest, easiest, it's so easy to just like respond reflexively and habitually and get annoyed about stupid shit with like my people that mean the most to me. It's so easy to just live every day like that.
Mhm.
But when I'm able to see it from that perspective, like
Mhm.
this ends and I have no idea when. Am I using my days like I really
Mhm.
would want to if I was dying, or if my
Mhm.
husband was dying, or if my children were dying? Like, and that changes everything for me when I can
Mhm.
really immerse myself in that perspective. um yeah, and that's hard and painful, but
Yeah.
so helpful in terms of leaning into the hard. What would I actually change in my life, and
Right.
what would be required of me
Mhm.
if I was viewing everything from that lens?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about like the end of last year, beginning of this year, when it was like maybe like a 5 month period of time where I was like, everything is on the table. Like
Yep.
everything is on the table, which I don't think I've ever done
Mhm.
that. I've done like, well, this is on the table, like this arena of my life. But I was like, they're all interconnected, and I don't know which one will bring me greater satisfaction. So it's all on the table. And yeah, needing to resource myself for those months of ambiguity of like, okay, well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. Like, but like putting it all in motion and then seeing which one is the one that lands.
Yeah. And I know what you're talking about, but I'm thinking for our listeners, when you say putting everything on the table, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah. So like, do I want to still be fully self-employed? Do I want to go back to work for an institution? Do I want to work for a predominantly white institution? Do I want to stay married? Do I want to still parent in this way? Do
Yep.
I still want to live in this house? Like, do I still want to live in this state? Like, it was all on
Yep.
the table. And that felt oddly peaceful, though
Mm-hmm.
very unsettling, because I just knew
There's that multiple truth.
it'll work itself out. Like I wouldn't choose to live like this all the time, but I know I could, for this season of my life, I can tolerate this because I know it will lead to something better, or I
Mhm.
will clarify.
Yeah. Right. And the freedom, like as unsettled, because I've clearly had everything on the table, around just a little bit prior to you. And the freedom that comes with the willingness to lean into that kind of hard, right?
Yeah,
To remember that I
right.
have choice and agency and voice and power,
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
that it is scary. But again, when you're willing to lean into the hard, like it was unbelievable, the
Hmm.
liberation, that the
Yeah,
felt embodied liberation that it created.
right.
While everything is no longer on the table, I know that at any point I
Hmm.
can honestly evaluate if something needs to be on the table again.
Hmm.
And I now can trust myself that, like, whew, this is not going to be easy.
Right.
Have this lived experience of everything being on the table.
Hmm.
So certainly one or two things can be on the table again.
Yeah, yeah. Everything feels easier now.
Everything feels easier. Yes.
Yeah, because at the time I was like, oh my gosh, are you gonna tumble all of this down? Are you gonna blow all of this up?
Right.
But now on the other side, it's like, well, yeah, like if everything was on the table, right? To your point, like, and now only maybe right now nothing is really on the table because like it's all good right now. But if I needed that again, it would be okay.
It would be okay. Right. And the way that I've even started thinking about it, because there was a lot of, I think, shame about like, I'm burning everything. I'm burning everything to the ground. What's wrong with me that I need to burn everything to the ground, or I'm willing to let everything burn to the ground?
Mm.
And I think the reframe of these last couple of years is like, I didn't start the fire.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
burning. It's burning.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
simply am making a very intentional and informed choice about, do I let it burn? Because perhaps it's meant to, or it just needs to, as there are seasonal things that sometimes just need to burn and in nature and in our lives. Or do I want to partner with someone to assess what needs to be done? But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't light the fire. I am not burning things down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm simply noticing what is and making a choice about, am I letting it burn, or am
Right.
I going to do something to change my relationship to the fire?
Right. Yeah. And I think for me, I've appreciated people like you who have like supported me in that season, right?
Yes.
And also honor the people who couldn't support me in that season because it felt too scary for them. It felt too dangerous. And for their own self-care and equilibrium, they need to operate in that way, which feels painful as the recipient of that, and yet recognizing it's not really about me. It's, what am I triggering in them that is really uncomfortable, and that I'm the kind of person who likes to be happy and likes to be at peace, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make that happen.
That's right. That's right. And again, that multiple truth of liberation is so incredible and freeing and beautiful, but it's also scary as fuck.
Yep.
It is both.
Yep.
It is both. And so many other things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if that is what we are constantly going for, that means there's always going to be this, all the feels, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it's a package deal. You
that's
can't
right.
have the good stuff without the hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Mm.
good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Good
That's like
conversation.
a good stopping point.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good deal. Reminder to our listeners to check us out, not just on YouTube, but on all the different platforms. Like, subscribe, review, all of that is super helpful. We're so grateful for that.
Yeah, when we release episodes about twice a month, whenever the twice a month is, and let us know how you're reacting to us.
Love it. Awesome.
Take good care.
You too. Love being in conversation with you.
Same.
Talk soon.
Bye.